A new study shows Americans have largely distorted views about a wide range of social realities. The study, published by the research company IPSOS, shows Americans are more likely to have a distorted view of society.
The study also found that 27% of the world believes the U.S. has the most distorted views.
Joining us now is one of the writers for this study and the author of the Perils of Perception, Bobby Duffy. Good to see you.
Great to be here.
All right, Bobby, so according to this study, it looks like Americans are getting a lot of things wrong. What are some of the factors that play into Americans having such skewed misconceptions?
There's a whole range of factors. America's not alone in getting lots of things wrong, although it does come quite high up the list of misperceptions. And it's across a whole range of issues and over a period of time. So what that points to is there's not one explanation. In the book about the study, we talk about how you can split it into two groups of explanations. One is how we think, what we think about, how our brains actually work, and the second is what we're told, so what we hear in the media, in social media, and from politicians. But how issues are discussed is definitely a key determinant factor, but it's also how our brains work, and in particular things like the fact that we are evolutionarily drawn towards negative information. So in cave people days, negative information was often more urgent and had to be acted on, so our brains literally process it differently. So that's why we overestimate lots of things that we worry about, like the murder rate going up when it's actually going down, the proportion of the population that are immigrants, the proportion of teenage girls that are giving birth each year, teenage pregnancies and births. We kind of be drawn to those vivid negative stories.
So, Bobby, let's back up a little bit. So you gave us a couple of highlights there, but I want to talk about what are Americans getting wrong. Tell me about sort of the highlights of the survey when it came to Americans. And I should point out that Italians were topping the list.
Right.
U.S. came in second. So, but anyways, give us some highlights.
Yeah, so there's a whole range of different issues, but a couple of examples is Americans think that 33% of the population are immigrants when it's only 14%. Only 2% of American teenage girls and women aged 15 to 19 give birth each year, but the average guess in America is that 24% of American teenage girls give birth each year. A massive misperception. Americans think that the murder rate has increased. The majority of Americans think the murder rate has increased. Only 13% of Americans think that the murder rate has decreased since 2000, when it's actually down 11% over that sort of period. So lots of these individual misperceptions that we see in America and in other countries, but more so in America than most other countries.
I mean, it's an interesting study. I'll push back a little bit. For example, my father is French. I grew up in France. Europeans have a very skewed perception of the United States. It's changed a lot in the last.
France is pretty high up on this list
France
too,
is high
actually.
on the list. I noticed
Yeah.
that. When people would tell me, people would ask me, not in Paris, but in the countryside, people would say to me, "Hey, does every American carry a gun? Right? Does every American, drink the Coca-Cola, and eat McDonald's? Where McDonald's is very popular in France. So." It's not just the U.S. that looks at the rest of the world or even within its own borders and finds these misconceptions. It sort of is happening globally as we're looking at this chart here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the point, it's that stereotyping image that you're talking about there. That's part of human nature, as we think in these stereotypes about people and about issues. And we're really drawn to vivid and unusual stories that we can kind of grasp really quickly. Humans are storytelling animals, so we struggle with representative statistics because we just generalize from those types of things that we remember. And that has real implications because we do focus on more negative information. So we think things are worse than they really are in most cases. One of the few things that Americans underestimate is the level of the proportion of the population that are overweight or obese. One of the key benefits of these misperception studies is they show us what we're really worried about and sometimes where we're not as worried as we should be. So Americans think that around half the population are overweight or obese, when it's actually 2/3 of the population who are.
I feel like this study is just feeding into a whole bunch of
I
stereotypes.
know, it really is.
So the study uses the term emotional numeracy, I hope I said it right, to sort of explain what might be behind this. One of the reasons what might be behind this. Can you flesh that out for us?
Yeah, so this is a key concept, is that it's not just that we worry about what we overestimate. So people's concern about immigration actually causes them to have a higher estimate of it. So cause and effect run in both directions on this. If I think something is a big issue and I'm worried about it, I'll think it's more common than it actually is. And so that has really important implications. It means that just bombarding people with more facts and telling them that they're wrong about their image of the country or any individual issue is not going to be that effective, because it misdiagnoses the issue, that it's actually our misperceptions are partly emotional. I have to say about the stereotyping that this plays into, that's exactly the point of the study, is to unearth people's stereotypes and then compare it against the real reality of these of the facts behind it. So it's kind of what we're trying to do here is not create these stereotypes or reinforce them, but point out that they exist and then say, no, this is the reality. Actually, the world is better than you think. Murder rates are going down. Immigration is not as high as you think. Teenage pregnancy has declined a lot. So the idea is not to reinforce them, it's to question them.
Now, Sweden was on the other end of the spectrum, just to let people know. But the other thing that the study sort of speculates is whether or not, if a society is more emotive, more expressive with their emotions, whether or not that may have an impact on how they perceive the world. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's this really interesting index that measures different countries in terms of how expressive they are in their emotions, whether they talk loudly, have big hand gestures, touch each other when talking, laugh loudly during conversations. And it's this international index that's gone around and observed people. And the top two countries in that are also the top two countries that are most wrong in our index. So Italy and the US, and the bottom countries tend to be places like Germany and Sweden. So it's kind of partly, if you think that our misperceptions are partly emotional and about telling a story that I'm worried about something, then that makes sense, that the more expressive a country are, on average, it's not everyone, and again, you have to be careful about national stereotypes, but on average, that greater sense of just being expressive with your emotions means that you're likely, when we ask you questions about how many immigrants there are in the country or what's happening to crime rates, you're going to go with a bigger number. It's the equivalent, the mental arithmetic equivalent of big hand gestures or exaggerations, that type of idea.
It's really fascinating.
It really is.
And Bobby, what's the remedy? I mean, is it just to read more books and get out and meet more people beyond your sphere of influence and the people that you interact with on a regular basis?
Oh, it's a great question, because it is about opening up to other ideas and information. The trouble with the current information environment, which is largely online for lots of us, is it tends to show us what we already like. It knows what we like from what we've looked at before, and you'll get more of what you like, as well as we pick ourselves some people to follow, some people to like on Facebook, and they'll be more like us than the rest of the world. And that's it's sort of playing on our confirmation bias, as it's called, that we see more of the world as we think it is. So mixing it up, getting a different perspective, that is definitely one of the key things that we need to do.
Really fascinating.
It is.
Bobby Duffy, thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.